Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We have a phenomenal show for you this week. We start out talking with U.S. Representative Pramila Jayapal about her tips on being effective advocates and about her insights on the policy that is moving and isn't moving inside the Beltway. Following that segment, we check in with the National Women's Law Center about our democracy, the state of our democracy, and how you can rise to protect our democracy too. Following that segment, we look at how the Trump administration is working to dismantle the Department of Education. Why would we do that? Find out in that segment. And then we close the show with one of my very favorite organizations, Planned Parenthood. Hear from them on the impact of Republican leadership and Donald Trump trying to undermine access to health care for women across America. We're going to jump right in with our first guest. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We are so excited to share with you that we have an amazing, nation-lifting family champion, Representative Pramila Jayapal from Washington State. Yes, my home state. She is here with us today. Welcome, Representative Jayapal.
It's so great to see you, and I always love your introductions, Kristen. I feel lifted just by that.
Well, you lift all of us. Now, people who are listening in our audience, everybody out there, there are some members of Congress who are seeing headlines about who are terrible, very bad, awful. They should get coal in their stockings if they had put them up for Santa this year. U.S. Representative Pramila Jayapal is not one of those. She is a champion. She is an angel. She is an avenger for justice. And I'm so glad you're here because you remind us that this is what democracy looks like, representation like you. And recently you spoke on the U.S. House floor about Trumpflation, which is how all of the policies and the tariffs that Trump is pushing forward, all of the policies that Republicans and Trump are pushing forward that are making our healthcare prices skyrocket, how those chaotic policies are making our prices, me, you, all of us who are listening, rise. Eggs are up. Coffee is up 33%. I'm very worried about that in particular. Food is up. Rent is up. Everything is up. What are you hearing from your constituents and from your colleagues about the impact of Trumpflation? And what are your thoughts on it?
Well, first of all, great naming. I actually got Trumpflation from you, Kristen, and it really stuck with me because this is inflation caused by Donald Trump and his policies, his betrayal of working people. He's the guy who said he was going to lower prices on day one. He's the guy who said, don't worry, everyone's going to be good. You know, we're going to manage the economy. And in fact, he's done the opposite. The economy has tanked, prices have gone up, healthcare premiums have doubled and tripled thanks to the Republicans' refusal to extend the ACA tax credits. We know that people are in dire straits after the $1.1 trillion cut to Medicaid earlier this year from the Republicans' big bad betrayal bill. And so everywhere somebody turns, what my constituents are telling me is they can't afford it. They are making hard choices about not having health insurance because they have to choose between health insurance or rent. They can't afford a trip to the grocery store to buy the things that they would normally buy for their families because it's just way too expensive and they don't have the cash. Unemployment is increasing. People are very afraid of what is going to happen to them and to their jobs. And the overlay of all of that, of course, if you happen to be an immigrant, you don't know if you can even go to work because there might be masked men outside waiting to kidnap you. And as you well know, such a huge percentage of our caregivers are immigrants. And it doesn't matter if you're a US citizen, by the way, 170 US citizens documented cases of 170 US citizens that have been kidnapped and detained despite being a US citizen. So at every turn, people are extremely worried about their futures. This is not what they bargained for. This is not what they were promised. And they're scared. You know, they're scared. They're trying to make ends meet. They can't afford anything that is part of being healthy, being fed, taking care of their kids. It's just not possible.
You raised such important points, and I want to really go back to what happened and what's happening with immigration. And you raised so many points, and of course, then I had 1,000 more thoughts to add into it. Just to share with our viewers and our listeners, 1 in 4 children in America has an immigrant parent right now. So when we're thinking about the scope and the depth and the breadth of the negative impact to the fact that the Trump administration and Republican leaders in Congress just took money out of Medicaid and healthcare, took money out of Head Start and SNAP and nutrition programs. They took money out of those programs to actually pay a ton of money for increased human rights abuses in the name of immigration enforcement. And a lot of people don't understand where the money came from for this expanded human rights abuses that are happening right now that you mentioned, importantly, is impacting people of all immigration statuses in the United States of America, including children in classrooms who are worried if they'll see their best friend the next day, or, people who are being traumatized in communities as a whole, writ large. I mean, we've seen the stories about what happened in Chicago and all over the country. There's a new story every day of just absolute unlawful, illegal human rights abuses happening in the name of immigration enforcement, but paid for by these devastating cuts to healthcare, childcare, nutrition programs, and more that actually not only boost our families, but boost our economy as a whole. And, we know our nation needs a safe, secure, compassionate immigration policy. We also know this is not it. This is cruelty. Right. And so what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, I've been working, and you have too. A lot of people have been working on humane immigration, reforms, a modernization of a system that hasn't been updated in over 30 years and doesn't meet the needs of our current economy. People want to have legal pathways for people to come in, to work here, to be with their family members, to study, to innovate, all the things that immigrants do. And not only have we not had that, but now the Trump administration has cracked down even further, and they're blocking every single possible pathway, and they're terrorizing people. And I think it's important to know, not only is it on the backs of this funding, $45 billion just for ICE in the big bad betrayal bill. That's just for ICE. ICE detention right now. We incarcerate 66,000 immigrants in ICE detention right now. That's set to go up to 110,000 because of that increase in funding. And those are going to private for-profit prison contractors who incarcerate immigrants in facilities that are paid for by taxpayer dollars with terrible, terrible conditions. So, Kristen, I'm the top Democrat on the immigration subcommittee, and I've been doing these shadow hearings, very powerful. I hope your listeners tune in to those shadow hearings and listen to some of the testimony. Today we had just a heartbreaking testimony at the 5th shadow hearing from a woman, Mildred, who her husband is a double amputee and has been detained. She's a U.S. citizen. He's been detained. He can't get his medication. He can't get his prosthetics. He's not able to see. He's not able to take his prosthetics off because he doesn't have anywhere to put them in the facility that he's being held. He's been moved time and time again. He's being held at the Stewart Detention Center in Georgia. We just continue to hear these stories. And when we were in Chicago for a field hearing, we went to a school, Kristen, a middle school, and it was so heartbreaking because one of those caregivers, one of those educators had been pulled out in front of the whole class of kids. And the ICE had come and tear gas right outside the school while children were playing and dressing up for Halloween. And so this is not just about the immediate trauma for those who are affected directly, but what about all those kids around them? What about all the parents who are there? What about all the families who have to explain to their young children why they are seeing masked men drag somebody away and separate families? So we have been doing everything we can to hold this administration accountable, but I'll tell you, they are lawless. And my only hope, Kristen, is that immigration is not actually a partisan issue. Despite the partisan rhetoric, despite the dehumanization, the vast majority of Americans across this country still love immigrants. They still understand that immigrants make America great, and they are not that far removed from a parent or a grandparent or themselves being immigrants to have forgotten what it means to have a country that's been built by immigrants and made strong by the contributions.
100%. And I want to go back to that Chicago experience a little bit, just to let our listeners know a little bit more about what's happening. after the teacher was dragged away in front of the children by masked ICE people who you don't even know who they are, because they're masked, which is
And
ridiculous.
there's
No
reports of people
accountability.
now being, posing as ICE agents, but actually sexually assaulting women because they're just masked. You have no idea who they are. They don't identify themselves.
Exactly. Uh, she was able to obtain legal representation, and it turned out she was actually taken out erroneously.
That's right.
So this is to your point. Like, this is lawlessness. This is no longer just about immigration enforcement. We have people being profiled and taken out of schools with tear gas going outside erroneously.
Well,
Nobody should be treated inhumanely, no matter
that's
what their
right.
immigration status.
But that's a really important point you're making, because according to ICE's own statistics, 73% of the people that are being incarcerated in these ICE detention facilities, ICE jails, have committed no crime, zero crime. And of the 27 remaining, the vast majority of that 27% has been for minor traffic offenses, and they're held in these horrific conditions. Immigration is not a criminal system. It is a civil matter. The people that are in immigration proceedings, that is an administrative proceeding. That means you're not provided with an attorney. The same way that you are in the criminal justice system. These people are not being afforded the due process rights, and 220 judges across the country have ruled that Trump's mass detention policies are violating the rule of law. 23 of those, Kristen, are judges who were appointed by Donald Trump. So this isn't just some liberal set of judges across the country. These are judges who have been appointed by Republican and Democratic presidents, including Donald Trump, who are ruling against him.
And that's really important, because as all of us are watching with absolute horror the headlines that are coming up every day, I think it's important to know a couple of things. There are leaders who are spectacular, amazing, and nation-lifting, like Representative Pramila Jayapal, who have been working literally for over a decade to update our outdated immigration system. This isn't a moment where we're like, oh, we didn't know there was a problem. Yes, there was a problem. And we have been working to update the outdated immigration system, and Republicans have been blocking it so that they can use immigrants as political footballs like we're seeing right now. That's not okay. Nobody should be used as a political football. Republicans should not have been blocking immigration policy reform for so long. It makes me so mad, because, hello, people who are listening and watching, I have seen the written policy that would bring us a secure, compassionate immigration system, and not this disaster of chaos, harm, and honestly, yuck. It just breaks my heart. It makes me sick to my stomach. So there are solutions possible for those people who are looking at the headlines and going, oh, well, maybe it just has to be this way. Not that you are doing that, but if you were doing that, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. And I'm wondering if you can talk, Representative Jayapal, about your vision for a better tomorrow. What would we have? I happen to know we would have a fair, secure, compassionate immigration system. We would have healthcare. We would have childcare. We can afford all these things if we weren't undermining our own communities by fueling human rights abuses. What are your thoughts about a better tomorrow?
That's exactly right. We have a vision. We have a vision where everybody can do well for themselves and for their families, take care of their families, contribute to the economy, contribute to this country in the way that they want to, and we want them to. We know that people would have universal childcare in our world, Kristen. We know that people would have universal health care in our world. We know that we would have a fair and compassionate immigration system that absolutely has border security and ensures that people can come to this country and work here and not be in the shadows and treated as human beings. We know that there is a way to take on the wealth inequality and the racial inequality that exists in this country today and make sure that everybody has a decent life, right? That you can send your kids to school, you can make sure that you can afford your rent, affordable housing, you can make sure that you can make sure that you can have everything you need, a good job that pays you the wages that you deserve, good union protections, and that you can retire with dignity and make sure that you can always afford the healthcare, including, by the way, your vision, dental, and hearing which is absolutely part of the plan. And Kristen, I just want to put in one more plug on immigration because you and I have been doing this work on Resistance Lab together. Thank you so much. And our next Immigration Justice Resistance Lab, it's a curriculum specifically around immigration justice and how we fight back against, nonviolently, against what is happening around us. That is a week from Sunday. So go to resistancelab.us and you can sign up wherever you are across the country. We just tried it out for the first time a month ago. We had 1,200 people from 44 states for a 2.5-hour training on Sunday, and everybody loved it. And they learned so much. And they're all set to go and fired up and ready to non-violently do everything they can to change what's happening around us.
You heard it directly here from Representative Pramila Jayapal. Don't give up. What you're doing is making a difference. There is a vision for a better tomorrow, which we can build, and we can afford to build it if we just keep persisting with our eye on the prize of change and an economy where everyone can make a difference and thrive and contribute. So thank you so much, Representative Jayapal. Woo! Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kristen. You're awesome. You're our Avenger. Keep it up.
Thank you. You are a Avenger. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with our next guest from the National Women's Law Center. I'm really excited about this segment. Thanks for sticking with us. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao-Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We are joined by one of my very, very, very favorite, spectacular, amazing humans and leaders, Fatima Gosgrave, who is the CEO and president of the National Women's Law Center. She's also an award-winning leader, and she is amazing. Welcome, Fatima.
I'm so happy to see you and to be with you today. And you know, ending the year with one of my favorite people is not a bad thing.
You're one of my favorite people, Jinx. The National Women's Law Center is a powerhouse of both legislative, legal, and communications shifting. And you yourself are situated most days, not every day, but inside the Beltway. What is happening inside the Beltway that everybody outside the Beltway that's listening should know about? We've got people listening pretty much in every state in the nation going, what is happening with these headlines? So what's your take? How do we describe this?
Yeah, first of all, the thing to know about the inside the Beltway noise is that this year has been unlike any year I have experienced. And that's for a couple reasons. First, Congress generally has not been operating like Congress. And by that, I mean, Congress has the responsibility of oversight. Congress has the responsibility of passing significant legislation for the betterment of people in this country. We've seen very, very little oversight. And the one big bill that they did pass really was terrible for families. And so if you've been someone who has watched Congress from afar for many years and you're wondering what is happening, Congress is not doing its job in the way that it should. And so that has been a weird thing this year, I will tell you. And then the second thing is the administration has been engaging in a wide range of conduct that I largely can just call lawless. And so what at the Law Center and many of our partner orgs have been doing has not just been participating in rulemaking in typical ways. We've had to rush into court multiple times because of the many unlawful steps. And so if you're wondering if 2025 has been a typical year inside the Beltway, I don't know how many years are typical. I just want to say it has not been.
It has not. You all. I don't know how many people went back and looked up Schoolhouse Rock videos. A, how does a bill become a law? B, separation of, we've got the legislative branch, we've got the judicial branch, and we've got the executive branch. None of that is working right now the way that Republican leaders in Congress are leading. And I say this, and I think this is really important because a lot of people don't realize who is in power, who has the majority in the U.S. House, who has the majority in the U.S. Senate, who holds the seat in the Oval Office, actually makes the rules of how things operate and determine how things work. And we hear a lot of times people saying, well, you know, Congress is messed up. Well, yes, the workings of Congress are messed up, but the leadership in Congress is determining what's happening, and that leadership is Republican leaders. And to that point, when we go outside the Beltway, we see that Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Libertarians, all the people, we want health care. We want access to child care. We want there to be some degree of adherence to the actual law and the Constitution of the United States of America. And yet we have a president inside the Beltway bragging that he has obliterated our constitutional rights to, for example, our freedom of speech. So there's, I would say, never been a bigger break between what actual constituents of all political parties want outside the Beltway and what specifically Republican leaders are doing inside the Beltway. And those Republican leaders are out of step with their own constituents. We've seen some corrections and some special elections and some corrections in the elections that just happened in November. What do you think is going to happen, Fatima, if you had a crystal ball with this scenario where, as you said, this is an atypical year of just lawlessness? Do you think the voters are going to do a correction in the midterm, and what can people do?
Yeah, well, the first thing that I should say is every poll that I've seen that has tried to ask voters this question, you get a sense of what's on their mind, right? Their cost of living is still hugely on their mind, but also the state of our democracy is on the minds of voters as well. And when I think about what people who generally have a lot to think about, you got to get your kids to school, you got to worry about taking somebody to the doctor, can you pay your bills? The fact that people have to also worry about their democracy is not a good thing. It's not a good thing for the American public to have to do that. I think last fall in November, what we saw was voters speaking loudly and clearly in statewide elections, in local elections, in judicial elections, that they wanted a shift, that they were not happy with the direction of the country. And I think we are going to continue to see that only grow further and further, rather than being distracted by attacking and demonizing trans people, going after and kidnapping immigrants in daycare centers. The voters are really saying they want you to focus on the main thing, which is the way they live their lives is tough right now. Things are super expensive, and they would like a serious president that is focused on those things. They'd like a Congress that is focused on those things. So the silly news that we have been seeing coming out of Washington is frustrating, but a big thing that Washington must do before the end of the year is address the Affordable Care Act tax credits. Right now, around the country, we're going to see the amount that people pay for healthcare skyrocket if Congress does not take action. And they should have done it before reopening the government. They should have done it at the top of this year, frankly. So the American people are going to be in real trouble. And the concerns that we have had about the cost of living and about the lack of focus in Washington are only going to grow if they do not get down to business.
I mean, of course, I 150% agree with you. And I want to add some information, people. If we do not extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, also known as Obamacare, and then actual costs could go up by an average of over 70%. And in rural areas, actual costs are expected to go up by more than 90%. Healthcare costs. Everybody gets sick. I don't know anybody out there who's never gotten sick. I don't know anybody out there who's never needed to go to the doctor, whether it's for, stitches on a finger because you rolled over it with a rollerblade. Maybe that happened to me, maybe it didn't. Or, you got a really bad flu and needed some medicine, or, you needed some medicine for strep throat. Everybody gets sick. And so everybody should be able to go to the doctor. We're the only industrialized nation that doesn't have some form of universal health care. Democrats support this. Republicans support this. Independents, libertarians, I could go through the list of everybody everywhere supports access to health care. But Republican leaders in Congress and Donald Trump have rolled back Medicaid and are rolling back the Affordable Care Act. And that is really important to be specific about who is doing what. And it's actually important news to be specific about who is doing what, because Democrats are there trying to say, We need healthcare. What are you doing? Even your constituents need healthcare. Why are you, messing with your own constituents and taking away your own constituents' healthcare? And there is no good answer that I have heard. Have you heard any good answer for
No, they
taking away
haven't.
healthcare?
They have not put forward a reason. And especially at a time when, they're building ballrooms at the White House that are unnecessarily deploying National Guard with no reason for doing it, really wasting money. Like I've never seen the federal resources be wasted out loud in the way that we have right now. All of that is happening with the backdrop of us waiting with bated breath to see if people are going to have to pay skyrocket rates for their healthcare. So that absurdity is where we are, Kristen.
It is ridiculous. Gold faucets are being put into the White House as our healthcare is cut. And I want to say,
cut in the name of tackiness is not okay.
No, I mean, I have opinion. Gold faucets shouldn't happen anyway, but what is happening? And this is a really important question about what is happening, because voters, constituents have time and time again, through our taxes, through our choices in who we elect to government, reaffirmed that we want the taxes that we pay to go for our healthcare. That is our money. That's not magic money. That is our money. And we have prioritized healthcare over gold faucets. Thank you very much. Beginning, middle, and end of story. So any elected leader, I think, who is prioritizing gold faucets over healthcare needs to be voted out of office. So I'm like, those people can go. We need actual healthcare, and we can afford it. To Fatima's point, there is massive, blatant, front page government spending waste. There is the ridiculous kind of government spending waste, which we're talking about right now with ballrooms and gold faucets. And there is the absolutely tragic, heartbreaking, make you nauseous government spending waste, which is the huge amount of money that has been poured into human rights abuses in the name of immigration enforcement by the Trump administration and Republican leaders in Congress. That does not have to happen. We can have a safe, secure, compassionate border and immigration policy without devastating our communities, without cruelty, and without cuts to healthcare in our national budget. Anyway, off soapbox. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, they're just, sometimes I have a saying with my kids when they're focused on the wrong things, they know exactly what I'm talking about. It is get right back on track. And I think actually that's what the American people were saying at the ballot box this fall. I think they're going to say it again next year. They want them to focus on the serious issues at hand and to get back on track. Can I name one more way that Washington has been off track? And I want to make sure people are paying attention to it, because it hasn't gotten the level of attention it should. And that is the subtle and actually the not so subtle targeting and racist and sexist attacks that we have seen, especially around some Black women, members of Congress and other elected officials. Just this week, we saw the president demonizing all Somali people, but naming checking particular Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. I mean, in overtly racist language as they sort of joked around the table inside the White House. Terrible. There should have been a uniform and strong response out of Congress about one of their colleagues being demonized that way. We have seen ridiculous weaponizations of the Department of Justice against other elected officials, including Congresswoman Monica MacGyver, including Attorney General Tish James, and others. We cannot let this go unnoticed. The subtle and not so subtle weaponization and targeting and demonizing. And so that is another way in which they're trying to distract the public from the things that matter to people's everyday lives, but also harming people along the way.
I think one of the main takeaways is that all of our listeners, our whole audience, should not give up. We just saw in the recent election that our votes, our voices, our narrative, our action is effective and is needed. And we see that in the polling. We're hearing from Fatima that there are daily assaults on democracy, on leaders, on our communities. and that those need to be paid attention to. So while it's exhausting, people, and while often it is demoralizing to look at the headlines, we know that when we come together, we must make a difference. We can make a difference. We will make a difference. And importantly, we have made a difference in the past. So we have about 30 seconds left. What's giving you hope to keep going and persisting?
Oh, the thing that has given me hope all year, and as we end the year, is the many courageous people who raise their hand, people who are supporting their neighbors, people who are bringing cases, people who are feeding people, providing walking school buses and more. The courage of people in this country, it just gives me hope every day.
And what gives me hope is your leadership and the National Women's Law Center. I hope everybody gets involved with the National Women's Law Center, supports the National Women's Law Center, pays attention to the actions that the National Women's Law Center says you should and could take, because it is powerful, important, and does make a difference. So thank you so much, Fatima Gosgraves.
Thanks, friend. Fun to be with you.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. Next up, we talk about what's happening at the Department of Education and why it matters to every single person in the United States of America. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We are joined by a really important guest. We have Kuna Tavalin, who's Senior Policy and Advocacy Advisor with the Council for Exceptional Children. Welcome, Kuna.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm so excited that you're here. First of all, the name of your organization. Yay, I love it. And B, could you share a little bit about the name of your organization and what it means, what it does? Council for Exceptional Children.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are an association that represents special educators, really the full spectrum, from folks looking to get into the profession all the way through folks training them in higher ed. But most of our members are teachers and administrators and folks who are in higher ed training that next generation of special ed teachers.
And special ed teachers are the superheroes of our teaching facilities. I have to say, I have a number of close personal friends who are special ed teachers, and I'm like, thank you for all you do every day. It's a really challenging job with big rewards because people do not develop, think, or be in the world in all the same ways. We're not like cookie cutter humans. And so being able to take the time and have the energy to meet people where they are, to learn in community in important ways is so critical. Yet, and I will say yet again, because this is absolutely unbelievable. Donald Trump, our current president, is dismantling the Office of Special Education Programs in the Education Department, and also moving special education to the Department of Health and Human Services, which we'll talk about in a minute separately because it's a layered thing. But what does it mean, not only for our nation's children, but for our country, our community, and our economy, that Donald Trump is literally dismantling the Office of Special Education Programs at the Department of Ed?
Yeah, I just want to go straight back to the beginning, which is, first of all, I fully agree with you. Special educators are superheroes. It's a really hard job, but education is hard, period, full stop. We are humans educating other humans. Everyone is different. And special education does have a much broader impact than just the kids who are receiving the services and the educators who are serving them. For example, that differentiation, we have learned so much about education and how to meet all children where they are because of special education research to practice. In my son's school, they're implementing a school-wide behavioral program for all children that was developed originally for kids with autism, right? Like, there's so much to gain. We have research about the value for kids learning alongside disabled or non-disabled peers and why that integration is so important. And taking one more step back, I think it's important for folks to understand what the major roles of the Department of Education are, right? And they are to level the playing field for the people who are furthest from opportunity, and specifically kids with disabilities and kids living in poverty. Those are our two major funding streams, major functions, right? So when we talk about dismantling the Department of Education, that's who we're talking about dismantling programs for, right?
And that hurts everybody.
Absolutely.
That hurts everybody. And, I think it was Albert Einstein, I'm going to get this quote wrong, but it was that if you keep doing the same thing in the same way and not getting good results, then that's the definition of not learning. I just made up that quote. That's not how it goes. But basically, we need lots of different types of learners, lots of different types of thinkers. We need lots of different types of perspectives in order to be the best community that we can be. Lots of different types of backgrounds. Research shows that time and time again. And so when we just obliterate the Office of Special Education Programs, we're also losing out on so much community learning, not just each individual kid, but also community learning. And what's your take on that?
I completely agree. But, the reason behind kind of all of the moves we've seen, and just to clarify, the Office for Special Education Programs is still currently at the Department of Education, although we have every reason to believe that it is on the short list of the rest of the programs moving out of that department. There hasn't been there's been plenty of transparency about that plan. But when we talk about, so in early October, nearly everyone, I think 122 out of 135 people in that office were fired. They're now back in their jobs thanks to a temporary stopgap measure from Congress. So they're guaranteed to have employment until the 30th of January. But these aren't, bureaucrats up in Washington making decisions for your children in their classrooms. These are special education experts. This is the brain trust that informs states to help districts implement the special education law, right? These are experts who could probably be somewhere else making a lot more money, who have dedicated their lives to this kind of public service for our nation's 15% of our nation's school children who do have special ed services. So that's who we're talking about. And in that kind of layered effort to dismantle the department, there have been verbal guarantees that the money is going to come through. No matter what, we'll protect the money. Well, the special education law is not just about money. First of all, the money part is pretty dismal, right? Congress said they would fund 40% of the excess costs to educate a kid with a disability. They're at about 10% of the excess cost. So they're nowhere near where they need to be to begin with. We would love to see more funding, but I don't want to undercut that is not the only part of the law, right? There is civil rights, oversight, implementation, technical assistance, support for parents, all of that personnel preparation, all of that is also within OSEP, overseen by those 135 people. So we're not just talking about pressing a button and getting money to a state, right? And when we hear we need to dismantle the bureaucracy, when it comes to special education, that bureaucracy quite literally is protecting the rights of kids with disabilities.
It's so important. What does it mean, do you think, that there's also talk of moving special education services to the Department of Health and Human Services, which, has an interesting RFK Jr. problem? I'll call it that.
There are a lot of open questions about that. My first question is, what are we talking about moving? Because if there is a goal to relocate that whole office, that's one conversation. If the goal is twofold, to decimate the staff and move the oversight, then that's a completely different conversation. Both of them, however, do have a lot of really troubling underlying conflicts. All of these interagency agreements are moving programs from a department that specializes in education to departments that do not specialize in education. And like every system we have in our country, when it comes to children, it's different, right? We have, you have psychologists, and then you have your child psychologists, right? We're talking about people who are not fully developed, who need to be nurtured. They are not, they need special treatment. I think it's really important, right? So first of all, we're talking about moving a program to an agency that doesn't have expertise in education. The big problems that I think we've been raising the most red flags about this potential move, besides getting rid of the brain trust, The first is segregation, right? And children with disabilities in the education context, it is a very grim past. When we think about what the world was like before IDEA, children with disabilities were hidden from sight. They were institutionalized. They were kept home. If they were lucky enough to go to school, they were often in basements or in classrooms in the back of a building. They still were not, they weren't integrated, they weren't seen. And for the kids who were in general ed classrooms, they were taught in a sink or swim model. And most of them really struggled, right? And so resegregating kids with disabilities sends us straight back to that pre-IDEA, those fears about what it looked like pre-IDEA. Special education has already been segregated from the rest of K-12 education. That happened last month when the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education Programs went to the Department of Labor, but the 15% of kids in the K-12 system who get IDEA services, those programs were not. And we are, to be clear, not advocating that they move to the Labor Department. We're advocating that all of the education programs remain together at a Department of Education. But that segregation has already happened. And even in that, we look and we think, okay, so what's the message there? Is it that kids with disabilities don't have workforce potential? I mean, what are we saying? So there's that, and I'll cut myself off from going too far down that road.
Well, you talked a little bit about advocacy. I agree with you. What are we saying? What are we doing? What are we losing? Not only what is each child losing, but back to my earlier point, what are we as a community, what are we as a country losing out on when we do that? Because we lose out on a lot. Study after study shows it. But I want to go back to your point about advocacy. People who are listening, we have about 3 minutes left. I'm sure they're like, oh my gosh, we have to save the Department of Education. We need to save the Office of Special Education. We need to stop this disaster, this undermining of our communities, of our schools, and of our children's access to learning. So what can people do?
I mean, we need everybody talking about this in every corner of the world, or at least of our country. Maybe that's too ambitious. You know, disability is not political. It happens in every single community. For those of us who are not disabled, we are really only temporarily able-bodied. I mean, nobody really knows what our futures hold. It is part of the human condition. So whether you think it impacts you directly or you don't, it really does, right? And I think that what we're losing as a society is what we've come to kind of recognize, and it's not perfect, but we are there and we are in that right direction, that everybody, regardless of ability, has a place in our society, right? And if we start to dismantle that, and again, just going back to the whole purpose of the department in the first place, to really elevate the kids living in poverty and kids with disabilities, if we dismantle that, we're crumbling our core values, right? I think that's really terrifying. I think in terms of advocacy, we need to keep having conversations. All the way to the secretary, there's acknowledgement that closing the department is not popular. We need to keep that drumbeat alive. We're in a very exhausting political atmosphere. It's very contentious. I think we can agree on kids, on our future, right? And so I think we need to keep on having these conversations. You may notice that our organization has been in the news more than usual lately. We are really looking at every corner, every platform to amplify this message around supporting kids with disabilities and why the federal government is so critical in that. And I think that anybody who has a conversation, has the opportunity to sound the alarm, should absolutely be doing that. I think that we need to demand more from Congress in terms of oversight. I think we need to understand what the plan is to support kids, right? We hear a lot about supporting states and dismantling bureaucracy. I want to hear what the plan is for the kids. 100%. So I think that we need to start demanding answers and demanding accountability and oversight, and making sure people know that this is a top priority.
And what do you think of the idea that everyone should call their member of Congress and say, do not dismantle the Office of Special Education and don't move it to the Department of Health and Human Services or any other place. Keep the Department of Education alive.
I think it's a great idea. I think it's necessary. And silence is a permission structure.
Yes. Make your voice heard. Call your member of Congress. Say, keep the Office of Special Education and the Department of Education alive and united. We need both. Please do not move them, dismantle them, eradicate them. We need them. Thank you so much for being on with us today. Kuna Tavalin with the Council for Exceptional Children. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We're going to take a quick break, but next up, Planned Parenthood under attack. Hear about a new report about the impacts on all of us because of the attack that Republicans in Congress and Donald Trump are leading on access to health care. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We have one of the very best organizations that has supported people across generations, across the country, and has been so important in so many ways and in so many levels, yet is under attack by the Trump administration. Hello, no, that's not okay. We have Planned Parenthood with us. And we're so excited to have with us Angela Vasquez-Giroux, who is VP of Communications at Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you for having me, Kristen.
I'm so thankful that you're here. You have released a recent report on the actual harms that defunding Planned Parenthood is having. As we get into that, can you share with us a little bit about what I kind of mentioned, which is how many people have visited a Planned Parenthood in the United States of America? It's a lot, so I want people to get centered on that as we begin looking at the actual harms.
Yeah, so in the last year that we put out our annual report for, we saw across all Planned Parenthood health centers across the country, Planned Parenthood affiliates saw more than 2 million patients, and that was for 9 million services. So the impact that Planned Parenthood health centers have across the country on communities, on patients' lives is, quite astronomical. And we also know that a little over half of that number of folks tend to rely on Medicaid to cover the cost of their care, which makes this unconstitutional defund provision that was passed by Congress and the Trump administration in July extra harmful and crucial for us to fight.
Absolutely. Now, we know that being able to choose if you're going to have children, and if so, when and how many, is crucial to being a free human. Absolutely important. We also know that Planned Parenthood, while it provides a lot of services, one of the service areas that it provides is abortion access in some areas at this point, because it's been so limited, unfortunately. And I want people who are right now saying, why is Moms Rising talking about abortion, to know that 6 out of 10 people who need and have abortions are already moms. And so this is an issue that is critical to moms: bodily autonomy, access to reproductive health care, access to birth control, access to abortion care, all critically important to moms. And 86% of women do become moms by the time they're 44 in the United States of America. So just with that grounding, can you talk a little bit more about what the report that you just released says about the impact of the defunding?
Yes, absolutely. So you're right. This is not an issue that is confined to any specific demographic of humans, right? It is about the ability of every single person in this country to reliably access the care they need when and where they need it, whether that's, a cervical cancer screening, an STI test, or an abortion in places where it's legal, right? So we found that since the defunding was allowed to go into effect, or was allowed to be enforced in September, which, as I think you remember, happened because our preliminary injunction was overturned. So in that time, that month of September, health centers across the country provided over 100,000 visits to patients who use Medicaid. So, right, the point of that law was to stop patients from coming to Planned Parenthood and using their Medicaid to access care. What the health centers did, because they are heroic and they made this Herculean effort to, again, provide care no matter what, they covered the cost of care for those patients, for the overwhelming majority of the folks who use Medicaid. And that comes out to an estimated $45 million in care that they covered in the first month of that defund going into effect alone. That is obviously a mammoth amount of care, a mammoth amount of money, of costs that these providers are absorbing on their own. And again, it's heroic. It is admirable. It is incredible. It is a testament to their innovation, their determination, to the partnership we have in certain states where they're able to help cover the cost of that care, but it's not sustainable, right? And so we are already seeing, when that becomes unsustainable, when they can no longer absorb those costs, then it becomes a question of how are folks going to access care? Do they simply go without? Do they go somewhere else? Do they pay out of pocket? Right. And we know, again, that for folks who are already struggling to access care, for folks who rely on Medicaid because it is difficult to access insurance in other ways, more often than not, it's going to be a real struggle for them to find another provider, to say nothing of the fact that, we know that patients come to Planned Parenthood because the care is top quality. They get compassionate, unjudgmental advice and guidance. They want to come see us for their care. And when they're denied that, it's a cruelty laid upon another cruelty. So for the moment, or for that first month, health centers were able to largely shield patients from that impact. That's not going to continue forever. At the same time, the defunding and other attacks from the Trump administration have had a real impact on folks' access to care, no matter how much, no matter what kind of insurance you use, right? Since the beginning of 2025, 50 health centers across the US have closed, largely due to these cuts or to other government attacks. 20 of those have come since July 4th, when President Trump signed that defunding bill into law. So again, even if you don't use Medicaid, even if you haven't been a Planned Parenthood patient before, this is impacting you. It's impacting your family. It's impacting your community. And on the day where you need care and we're the ones available to help you out, when our health centers are, there's a real chance that we could be gone because of this unconstitutional defunding provision.
This is happening at the same time as healthcare access across America is being rolled back by the devastating cuts that Republican leaders in Congress and Donald Trump pushed through in their big bad bill, which undermined access to Medicaid for people across America, and unfortunately is still being rolled out now. So all of the negative impacts haven't even been implemented yet. And we know from research and from studies, and one place I read is that 1 in 3 women in America have visited a Planned Parenthood healthcare facility at some point in their lives. And to your point, to have especially Planned Parenthood being rolled back as we have a maternal health crisis, as we have a situation where younger women are experiencing increased rates of cancer, where we have a lot of health emergencies happening at the same time, to roll back access to Planned Parenthood facilities that are healthcare facilities, which all of them are, is absolutely irresponsible for the Trump administration and Republican leaders in Congress to do. Do you have advice on how people can stand up? I heard you say that there's been bridge funding, but that's temporary. I also happen to know from reading the law that the worst is yet to come in terms of the implementation of these Medicaid cuts. So do you have advice on what people should and could do? Should everybody call their member of Congress and say, reverse the Medicaid cuts and protect Planned Parenthood? That's what I'd like to do. What do you think?
There are tons of ways to get engaged, right? You can go to the Planned Parenthood website and sign up to get information and become a volunteer. You can do the same thing with your local affiliate in your state, which you can also, I think, access from the main Planned Parenthood website. You absolutely can and should be in regular communication with your elected officials at all levels and let them know what your priorities are and what matters to you. And for tons of Americans, we know from polling and research, that is healthcare, that is reproductive care, that is abortion. And so you should be, if you can, in frequent conversation with those folks. And there are tons of organizations, including ours, who make that really easy. So again, sign up to get information from us, sign up with Moms Rising, sign up with every organization you're following on Instagram. And that's another great way, right? We know that folks trust us as friends, as messengers. And so share information that you find that you think your friends and family need to know, because A, they do, and B, they'll trust it more coming from you. If you have it in your budget to be able to support organizations, either your local Planned Parenthood, an abortion fund, any of the organizations that are really on the front lines, bridging the gaps to provide care, please do. Every dollar goes further than you can imagine, right? There's no shortage of people who need support, organizations who are doing the hard work. The great news is that you don't have to do this on your own. There are tons of places that you can show up and lend your hands, lend your expertise, chip in $5, whatever it is. So please, sign up to get information from us, sign up with Moms Rising. Whatever you do first is a step in the right direction. And ultimately, we know this fight is just beginning. There's plenty more to come. And we need all of you involved to help us, again, keep health centers open, keep people healthy, and make sure everybody gets the same chances that, frankly, we all did to live the lives we want.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a good point. We want to make sure everybody has the same access to healthcare that we all did. And what's the website for Planned Parenthood? I just want to make sure we get that out there so people can join up, sign up, donate, get involved, stay involved, don't give up, all the things. What's the website?
PlannedParenthood.org.
Okay, great. PlannedParenthood.org. Everybody go there. My personal story, my grandmother, she passed away 9 days shy of her 106th birthday. And she was very with it and smart till the very end. And she actually, her mom, my great grandmother, was involved in making sure there was reproductive rights. And she followed my great grandma. My mom was involved, and obviously I'm involved too. So hello, can't give up across generations. But when she was about a month before she passed away, she called me up and she said, "Kristen, there is a crumb and we need to sweep the crumb out." I was like, "What is the crumb?" She was like, "The crumb is Donald Trump." She was like, "You cannot give up on having your rights and, my daughter's rights be less than her rights." She was like, "This is ridiculous. You're going the wrong way." She was like, "If you are tired, reverse your mindset. If you feel like you're getting too old to do this work, you've been doing it too long, reverse your mindset. Generations require us to stand up for them as we are standing on the shoulders of generations. This is not just about now, it's about tomorrow." And hello, I was like, oh my goodness, of course I'm going to try to deal with the situation. But to your point, Angela, which I think is really important, none of us are dealing with this situation alone. When you look at polling, the vast majority of people in the United States of America actually support access to reproductive health care, the full suite of reproductive health care. Not only support it, but need it. And so we know that when we each do whatever we can do, whether it's give $5 or give 5 minutes of our time or give, a week of our time to stand up or to share our story or whatever's happening, all of us doing the parts that we can do in a moment does add up to the change that we need, not just for this generation, but for future generations, so that the previous generations are not mad at us. No, I'm kidding. But we are needed, you all. This is our moment. This is our moment to be called to action and to not give up. And what are your thoughts on that?
It's really easy to lose hope, right? We've most of us who are in this work right now lived through 2016, and we thought, oh, great, we'll never have to do that again. And here we are. But I think we can take a lot of instruction from folks who are younger than us, from people like Zohran Mamdani, right? Upsetting expectations and carving a new path forward that other people aren't going to give up, and we shouldn't either, right? There are enough of us, there's enough will, there's enough possibility, there's enough opportunity for us to make the world that we want to live in now, that we want to leave our kids and, God willing, our grandkids. So again, you need to take a break, you need to take a breather, go ahead and do that. We'll hold it down while you do that. But in the meantime, do what you can, give what you can, get involved, because we need everyone engaged to make this happen.
Thank you so much, Angela, with Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Get involved with Planned Parenthood, stay involved, don't give up, be Hoptimists together. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
Thank you. Well, that's it for our show today. Thanks so much for tuning in as we tackle the top topics facing our nation in the way that requires the most boring disclaimer in the history of the planet Earth. Here goes. Views expressed on this show are those of the individual speakers and should not be attributed to Moms Rising, to this station, or to any news or social media service that may disseminate a recording of this show to the public or to any segment of the public. Boom! We'll catch you next week.